this unit over here, not turn it down to 72, it's up to 76. Yeah, it is. It's cool. It's 72 and it's 72, so it is doing its job.
Hi. I know, it's tough. Good morning. We're going to continue where we were last week, basically. We're going to start out in the book of Acts. We're going to be looking at several passages that we already looked at, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time. But we are continuing to talk about the work of the church. And we started last week by having this chart on the various aspects of the work of the church generally suggested. And this is simplistic. Preach the gospel, edify the saints, provide for the needs of the saints. Where do these come from? Where did this list come from? What is it based on, I guess is what I'm asking. Is there some book out there that it's based on? A bunch of letters? What are you talking about? Who wrote these letters? The idea is these are based on the Bible. We're getting them from the New Testament. Is there an emphasis on preaching the gospel in the New Testament and the letters? And we looked at some of those verses last week, so we're not going to go over that again. Edify the saints. We emphasize how versatile that term is. It means to build up and to strengthen. You can hear the word edifice in there. So you got something that's really strong that is built. Edify, build up, strengthen. That is what we do every time we assemble. That is our goal, to provoke one another to love and to good works, as Hebrews 10:24 says. And then provide for the needs of saints. And that's very specific. We're providing for needs not of the world in general as the work of the church. We couldn't do that anyway. But we are authorized in the New Testament. We're going to look at this some more to provide for the needs of the saints. So let's think about that today. We're especially going to focus on number 3. In Acts chapter 6, in the first 6 verses, you have men who are chosen by the church in Jerusalem to assist with the daily distribution. Look at verse 1. Now in these days, when the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint by the Hellenists, my version says, arose against the Hebrews because their widows were being neglected in the daily distribution. These terms, Hellenists, refer to the Greek-speaking Jews, and Hebrews refers to the Aramaic, or Hebrew as it's called in the New Testament, Aramaic-speaking Jews there in Judea. A lot of folks had come from all over the world, and they had descended on Jerusalem. We've been looking at that on Wednesday nights, as a matter of fact. And they're here learning about the gospel. And so you've got people. You've got lots of folks. What did they do? They went to work helping each other, selling property so that there would be money, so that there would be food to provide for folks. Now, was this something for the community at large? Were they out there feeding everybody according to the verses that we're reading? Well, no, they weren't, as a matter of fact. It was hard enough just taking care of the saints. The daily distribution of what? Well, the implication is food. They're hungry, and they're being overlooked. And the work, because of this complaint, came to a standstill, and the apostles are able to solve this. So we do see saints helping other saints in the local work. Are we authorized to take money out of the church treasury and help a Christian who needs support? According to this passage, it sure sounds like it, doesn't it? We looked at Acts chapter 11, verses 27 through 30, a very important passage. It's just kind of right here in the middle of some other issues here in Acts chapter 11. And what it says is that prophets, New Testament prophets, came down to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to Antioch. So the work at Antioch is growing. Antioch of Syria. This is where the disciples are first called Christians, it says in the previous verse. And there is a New Testament prophet who's able to peer into the future. Agabus predicts there's going to be a famine all over the world. And this is something Luke tells us happened in the days of Emperor Claudius. So the disciples in Antioch determined, everyone according to his ability, to send relief to the brothers and sisters living in Judea. What do we see? Saints helping saints, Christians helping Christians. And they did so. They collected these funds and they sent them to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul. Barnabas and Saul were well trusted by the folks there at Antioch. They had helped build that work up tremendously. And so there is this generous outpouring of help. Saints helping saints. I'm going to go chronologically here. 1st and 2nd Corinthians actually come before Romans chronologically. So I'm going to take a look at 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2. These three passages go together. And we need to look at verse 3 as well. Paul is writing to the Corinthians from Ephesus. And Paul fully intends to go to Corinth, and he wants them to have a collection ready for another need that Acts never talks about. Acts talks about that financial need there in Acts 11, but the one that Paul is very much concerned about, and I'm sure there were many others, but this particular collection, all three of these passages address. And he writes to the Corinthians, and he says, "Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so you also are to do." So other churches have helped with this contribution. "On the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up, as he may prosper, so that there will be no collecting when I come." Get the funds ready before I get there. "When I arrive, I will send those whom you accredit by letter to carry your gift to Jerusalem." So Paul isn't trying to collect funds and steal money. He's trying to do this all above board so no one accuses him of anything. And so he's trying to encourage them. Now, the Galatian churches, they're collecting funds. Corinth, this is a brand new church, a brand new work, but they're affluent. They're a coastal city. They've got a lot more money than places elsewhere. And Paul expects them to give. And we read a little deeper in 2 Corinthians 8, and we find out that, according to Paul, they're the ones who wanted to help. They wanted to help. And so he is expecting them to do that. And so in the opening verses of 2 Corinthians 8, he says, let me tell you about the churches of Macedonia. And that's just to the north of Corinth. Galatia is in Asia. This is in Europe. The churches of Macedonia, in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of money, no, abundance of joy, and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. They didn't come up with much money, but they didn't have much money, and that's the point he's trying to make. They gave according to their means. It's not much financially, as I can testify. They gave beyond their means, of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. This collection is Christians helping other Christians. And he says that they gave not as we expected, but they first gave of themselves. Paul's laying it on thick here, isn't he, with the Corinthians? All those Macedonians, I can't believe how generously they gave. They may not have given much because they're poor, but you guys, you can give a lot more than that. And Paul emphasizes, you must do this because I'm commanding you to do it. Is that what he says? What does he say? What we often quote here from 2 Corinthians 8, as well as 2 Corinthians 9, verse 7. Let's look at verse 7 of chapter 9. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. All right. When we take up a collection every first day of the week, per Paul's instructions, 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2, taking up a collection on the first day of every week. When we take the funds up, is it for, how did he word it there a moment ago? For the relief of the saints. When we take up a collection on the first day of the week, today, is it going to be specifically for the relief of the saints? Well, it's not. And yet we appeal to 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2 is the example of Christians giving of their means on the first day of the week. Okay, so a good example of how when it was needed. Could we take up a collection that has nothing to do with upkeep of a building or supporting preachers elsewhere, and it's only for helping somebody who's down on their luck and they need some financial help? Could we do that? Have we done that? You bet. We most certainly have. Okay, so what's the difference then between us taking a collection as a church and us saying, hey, you guys, come here. They've got a financial need here. Is there a difference? And we're just individual Christians are helping other Christians. Okay, you say that as individuals we could give money to non-Christians. Sure, we can give our money to anything or anyone as non-Christians. But what's the pattern we're seeing in the New Testament? The church helping other saints. That's the emphasis. Where, in fact, do you see the church in the New Testament giving money to non-saints? You know, money wasn't free-flowing then any more than it is now. I went to the grocery store yesterday. I thought it'd just be, $50, $60. It was twice that much. Just didn't feel right. Eggs. Have you seen the price of eggs lately? Wow. I need a collection. And then this collection that Paul is urging the Corinthians to work on, he finally goes to Corinth. 1 Corinthians, he's not in Corinth, he's writing to the Corinthians. 2 Corinthians, he's not in Corinth, he's writing to the Corinthians. Well, when he writes to the Romans, he is in Corinth. So I'm going to go back in my Bible, but chronologically in the future, where Paul is in Rome. I'm sorry, I blew it. He is in Corinth writing to the Romans. He's finally made it to Corinth. And this is what he says beginning in verse 22 of Romans 15. He's writing to the Romans and he says, I've been intending to come to here and to come see you guys. This is the reason why I have so often been hindered from coming to you. But now, since I no longer have any room for work in these regions, and since I have longed for many years to come to you, I hope to see you in passing as I go to Spain. We don't read in the New Testament about Paul's work in Spain. It may not have even happened. Probably did, but we don't know. And he says to the Romans, I'm going to pass through to be helped on my journey there by you once I've enjoyed your company for a while. Is this for Paul's personal gain or is this for his missionary work? He's preaching and they're supporting him. And we talked a little bit about that last week as well. At present, however, verse 25, I want to come see you guys in Rome. I do. And then I want you to help me go on to Spain. At present, however, I'm going to Jerusalem, bringing aid to the saints. For Macedonia, northern Greece, Achaia, southern Greece, have been pleased to make some contribution for the poor among the saints at Jerusalem. They were pleased to do it. Had to prod those Corinthians, though. And indeed, they owe it to them. For if the Gentiles have come to share in their spiritual blessings, they ought also to be of service to them in material blessings. When therefore I have completed this and have delivered to them what has been collected, I will leave for Spain by way of you. Now, two things. One, did that happen? Did Paul go to Jerusalem, distribute the funds to the elders in Judea, and then say, okay, I'm going to Rome now? That's not how it happened, did it? When he went to Rome, what happened? When he went to Jerusalem, Mark. When he went to Jerusalem, he was in prison. So here's Jerusalem, here's Rome. He's in prison. And he eventually makes it to Rome, doesn't he? That's when the shipwreck happened. And he eventually makes it to Rome. There at the end of Acts chapter 28. Isn't that something? Here's an apostle of Jesus making plans for the future. Man plans, God laughs. Oh, you think that's how you're going to get to Rome? Well, I got different plans for you, and it all works out for the spread of the gospel. Look also with me at verse 27. This is important to Paul for two reasons. One, there's a financial need in Judea. But two, he wants to bridge the gap between Jew and Gentile. And I just wanted to take a moment to mention that. This is important to him. These are Gentiles, Christians, who are going to be giving to Jews, helping them financially. Isn't that wonderful? That's what he wants. I see a hand back here. Buildings just for Christians. Okay. And you said, no, this is the Lord's property. Absolutely. Yeah. So what if we had a car accident out here? You got a bloody body out here. Are we going to say, oh, can't bring them in here because this is holy ground. Can't bring them in here. What would you do? What if there's a hurricane and people are stranded out here and they want somewhere to go that's safe? I don't know if this would be the safe place or not. So never mind, forget that. You know, there's this principle here. Do not work on the Sabbath. Do not work on the Sabbath. And Jesus countered that, didn't he? He worked on the Sabbath. Now, their definition of work, I think, was very different. But what Jesus said is the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. It's not that we're supposed to slavishly follow this law. For example, he says, which one of you, he's talking to these hypocritical, snobbish Pharisees, and he says, if one of you had a sheep that fell into a pit on the Sabbath, you're just going to say, see you tomorrow, sorry. Or son that fell. This past Sunday, we had one of our members who got sick, and he had to go to the hospital. And his wife said to him, sorry, we can't go. Today's Sunday. That doesn't work, does it? Why do we have people at the hospital? Why do we have law enforcement working on Sunday? Because they just love working on Sunday? Keeping them away from worship many times? Well, it's part of our infrastructure. It's part of our work. Are there exceptions sometimes? And something else to think about, you're talking about the building. They didn't have church buildings in the first century. Where do they normally meet? In people's houses. Ma'am? Somebody was coughing, I couldn't hear. Okay, they met in synagogues. Synagogues during the week were community centers. They also collected taxes there. So that's an interesting issue. Now, what we're talking about is our funds, our money. We're not necessarily talking about our building right now. We're talking about the work of the church. What should our building be used for, though? Primarily, at least. You think so? All right. I would think so. Is it possible, though, for us as a church to spend incorrectly the money that we have in our collection? What would be an example of misspending the Lord's money? A crystal chandelier? That'd be awful pretty. That would be ephemeral. It would be beautiful and remind us of heaven. How about you buy me a brand new... I saw this the other day. Somebody was complaining because, some pastor was complaining because the church didn't buy him a Rolex. How about we take the Lord's money and buy me a Rolex? I wouldn't want that, by the way. That'd be too much money. I'd be too nervous to be wearing that on my arm. Is there a difference between my money and the church's money? Really? Because I can help people financially. The church can certainly help folks we've seen. I want to take you to Acts 5. There's a lot going on here in Acts 5. Lying to the Holy Spirit, for example, that's a pretty serious issue. But what I want us to look at is the right that this man Ananias, who lied to the Holy Spirit, and the power he had over his money, and when it was his own. I've got verses 3 and 4 on the screen. It says in verse 2 that Ananias, along with his wife, her knowledge, he kept back for himself some of the proceeds and brought only a part of it and laid it at the apostles' feet. This is a great situation. People are selling property to help with that financial need we'll see come to a head in Acts 6. They're helping other Christians. Was there anything wrong, you know this passage, was there anything wrong with Ananias selling a piece of property, keeping some of the proceeds for himself, and giving some, the rest to the church, laying it at the apostles' feet? No, there's nothing wrong with him doing that. What was the problem, though? He lied and said what? This is all that I got. So we don't have numbers here, but let's say he sells it for $10,000. And he actually sold it for $10,000. He gives $5,000 to the church, lays it at the apostles' feet. And he keeps $5,000 for himself, but he says, I only got $5,000 for it. Here's all of it. Now, in the context, who is he trying to be like? You go back to Acts 4. Who's he trying to be like? Probably Barnabas. Everybody loves Barnabas. I mean, he's just great. Son of encouragement. He sold property, gave it. But he doesn't want to give all the money. And here's what Peter says when he confronts him. Verse 3, Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back for yourself part of the proceeds of the land? That's not the issue of just keeping it. Here's the issue. While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? It's your money. You can do whatever you want to with it. Why is it, third question, that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to man, but to God. And so the point of this passage is you need to give me all your money. Oh, no, that's not it at all. The point that we're bringing out this morning is that when Ananias had this money, it was his. He could do whatever he wanted to with it. Once he laid it at the apostles' feet, whose money was it then? The Lord's money. And the issue is not, again, it is not that he has kept back some of the proceeds, but that he has lied about the money. We're going to leave Acts 5. We're going to go to 1 Timothy 5. 1 Timothy 5. And this is actually more about the church being involved very specifically in helping an individual, helping people. 1 Timothy 5, we're going to look at verses 8 and 9. And these are, the heading I have in my Bible, First Timothy 5 says, instructions for the church. And indeed they are. But here's something for the individual. He says, if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. You need to take care of your own family. It's not the church's responsibility. It's not anyone else's responsibility. It's your responsibility. Let a widow be enrolled if she is not, and he begins to give some qualifications for putting a widow on a roll. What roll? What's he talking about? Financial support from the church. How many widows are on our roll? What'd you say? None. All right, did they have Social Security back then? No. Do they have the government programs that we have today back then? No. It's a different situation. And you might also say this, that every woman, every widow that we know of is disqualified because she is supposed to, verse 10, have washed the feet of the saints. Sorry. You know, when Ricardo dies, you better start washing feet now so you can get on the roll. All right, and we understand. We modernize that. We're not going to say it's a literal washing of feet. That's an issue for another day. Why are we doing that? Let a widow be enrolled. The church is authorized. This is the number 3 that we were talking about. Preach the word, edify the saints. Number 3, help financially the saints. We are authorized to do that. And you see an example of that right here. Who should take care of the widow? Family. And Paul says if they don't, they're worse than an unbeliever. Drop down to verse 16. He says here, if any believing woman has relatives who are widows, let this believing woman take care for them. Let her care for them. That's the same thing that verse 9 was saying. I'm sorry, verse 8, providing for your relatives. And he's singling out, and he's saying, okay, a believing woman is going to take care of the widows in her life. She needs to take care of them. Listen to this. Let the church not be burdened, so that it may care for those who are truly widows, or widows indeed, as the older King James Version says. Widows indeed. Those who meet those qualities that he just described. Let the church not be burdened. What does he mean? Taking money out of the collection and helping widows indeed? It's exactly what he's talking about. We can do this. Now, for decades, what I saw is that just didn't happen. And more recently, I guess in the last few years, I have seen churches doing that. The Hurricane Harvey. Melanie and I lived through that in Houston. And there were churches right and left trying to help, calling elderships and saying, what do you need? Do you have somebody who needs help? What example are they following there? They're taking money out of their treasury, or many of them were taking special collections and saying, we're going to send it to people in Kentucky were calling us in Houston. People all over the country. They're following Acts 11, 27 through 30. They're following the example of the New Testament. Could we just empty our treasury and help Christians? Well, I think we could, but if there's a need, let not the church be burdened. Do we have unlimited funds? No. We can't help everybody. We can't. I have a bunch of passages here, and we've already looked at those all we really looked at all of these. And so I'm not going to scroll through those. Can you skip to the next group of slides? But you see churches, Christians helping others. Now, I'm going to throw out a couple of verses. Jesus is not talking about the church helping other Christians, but I think there's a principle here and that I think is going to help us to think about this. In Luke chapter 4, Jesus made his fellow Nazarenes very angry with him. And this is what he said in Luke chapter 4, verses 25 and 26. He says, let me remind you about Elijah. Elijah the prophet from the Old Testament, 1 Kings and 2 Kings. But in truth, I tell you, that there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah when there was no rain on the earth for 3 years and 6 months. And a great famine came over all the land. And Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. So during this destitute time of a famine in Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, no rain for 3.5 years. We just went through 3.5 months of no rain and thought we were going to die. 3.5 years. It was bad. And God was withholding rain because Ahab said, I'm going to worship Baal, the god of thunder, who's going to give us rain. Oh, yeah? Okay, let's see how that works out for you. And Elijah did help a widow out, didn't he? Helped himself out, too. Was she a Jew? Was she an Israelite? No. And so what's Jesus' point here? Well, in the context, he is saying, I'm rejecting, or God is not going to put up with your attitude just because you're Jews. And so I'm going to go help people who want to hear the gospel. You don't want to hear the gospel? Fine. And then he gives another example in the very next verse. This is Elisha, the successor to Elijah. There were many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha. And none of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian, 2 Kings 5. All right, what's the point I want to make from this? Are there people in Corpus Christi who need financial help? Yes. Tell me about them. You probably see a lot of folks in your line of work who could use a few $100s here and there. So why don't we get their names and their addresses and go help them and take money out of the church treasury and do that? Well, for one, they're not necessarily, I don't know these folks, but they're not members of the Lord's church. Are we really allowed to make that distinction and say, well, you're not a Christian, and so the church is not going to take funds out of its treasury to help you? Could I, as an individual, take money out of my wallet and give it to them? Well, we think that's fine. What if it is a Christian? What if it's a Christian and they say, hey, I have a financial need and I need the church to give me money? Are we necessarily going to give them money? Well, why not? They're Christians. We're authorized to do it. Ma'am? Depends on why they need it. What does 2 Thessalonians 3 say about people who don't work? They're not going to eat either. We need to be smart about how we spend our money. We certainly need to be smart about how we spend the Lord's money. We need to spend it in ways that are authorized. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, but I really need that 75-inch HD TV. They got 8K now. Did you know that? I need that in my living room. Yeah, there's a big difference between what we want and what we need. And there's also a time when it's apparent people could help themselves, but they're not. Why should the church be burdened with that? We need to be smart about how we spend the Lord's money, not just hand it out. And our eldership is. Just like in the first century world, funds were sent to elderships of churches who oversee a local work. That's what we have here as well. I don't even know how much we have in our checking account. I have no idea. Yeah, there you go. Now, most churches I've been with, they have a budget, and they publish that budget, and it's very transparent, and everybody knows what's going on. I haven't seen that. I'm not privy to that. Do you trust our eldership, though, that they're spending the money wisely? Yeah. We have Gus as one of our elders. He's going to make sure that money is spent wisely, if nobody else will. So that's another issue all in itself. I'm not going to keep going down that road. We're not here to waste the Lord's money. We are not. I think it's wonderful, though. I know of 2 instances when our eldership has helped a brother or sister in need. And I'm so appreciative of that. I'm so thankful for that. Yes, ma'am.
We're talking about taking money from the church, but also
there are wrong ways to put money in it. And what would you suggest is a wrong way? Okay. Okay. What if we have a bake sale? You can make a bunch of pretty cookies for us. Why aren't we going to do that? Why aren't we going to have a yard sale? I mean, we got a great parking lot. We could have a great big yard sale out there. Why aren't we doing that? Raising money that way. Free will offerings. We're not a business. It's not part of the, okay, all right, not part of the work of the church, but it'd be money to help the work of the church. Yeah, bingo. Car wash. I'm not doing it. Yes, sir. Okay. Christians giving free will offerings, going back to what you said. What if we had a collection on, we're having a gospel meeting soon. What if Monday night we said we're going to pass the plate and take up a collection? And we would say, no, you can't do that. You can only do it on Sunday. And I'll leave it at that. Could we take up a collection on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday? The Lord's Supper, we believe, is on Sunday. And I think probably that's exactly when we should be giving our free will offerings. But I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure. But I think so. I think Sunday is the day when we assemble. Sunday is the day when we do partake of the Lord's Supper. And these are free will offerings. This principle of the church not being in the business of helping everybody. There are lots of widows in Israel. Elijah didn't help them. There are lots of lepers in Israel. Elisha didn't help them. We can't help everybody and their dog. We can't. We just can't do it. Jesus our Lord, he healed lots of people, didn't he? Lots of people during his ministry. He didn't heal everybody. And there was a time when he was feeding people, the 5,000 men. I mean, there may have been 10,000+ people that he fed with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. And why did he do that? Was it simply because he wanted to help them to have supper that night? No, he was making a powerful illustration. I am who I claim to be. I'm the Son of God. And God has come to give you abundance in life. And he leaves them. And they're yay, yay, Jesus, we love Jesus. And then they start chasing him around. And they finally catch up with him. And they say in John 6, verse 24, hey, why don't you come over here to this side of the sea? And Jesus just gets right to it. He says, I tell you the truth. This is what's going on here, folks. You want to be with me because of the loaves and the fishes, not because you understood the miraculous signs. And then he tells them this, don't be so concerned about perishable things like food. Spend your energy seeking the eternal life that the Son of Man can give you. Could we fill this building up if we started giving money away in the community, getting food away in the community? Maybe. You know, that illustration I used one time of having a $1,000 check under one of our seats, publicizing it, really advertising it a lot and letting folks know, you come to services on August 21st, 2022 at Parkway Church of Christ, 4141 Bronner Parkway, and you could be the lucky one to find a $1,000 check under your seat. We probably get a few folks. But Jesus is not after numbers, is he? In and of itself. We want everybody to obey the gospel, obviously. Jesus isn't after crowds. He's after hearts. And when people stop listening to his words, I am the bread of life, the food stopped. And once you start giving out food, are you ever going to be able to stop giving out the food? When that becomes the focus. And so that's something we need to really think about. Now, I'll tell you, as an individual, I'm the preacher. I'm up here. My vehicle's out under the canopy. And people go, oh boy, I'm going to go get some money. And they've got a sob story. And I've been doing this almost 30 years now. I don't know how much, but I have given thousands of dollars to people over the years. And I'm sure you have as well. You know how many times I believe I have helped someone who legitimately needed help and were willing to work. They were just down on their luck. They needed some help to pay that rent or whatever it is they had to do, put food on the table. I give them $200, $250. You know how many legitimate cases I have found over these years? Shane, guess how many? 0. I thought you were going to say 0. I thought you were giving me this knowing look. 0. Guys here said, oh, I'm coming Sunday. Thanks for this money. I'm coming Sunday. You know what I thought to myself? Yeah, right. He didn't come. They just want the money and they're gone. Beggars, I mean, people who come in here. There are fellow Christians, though, who we help. It's a little different situation. What if there's this big roll of $100 bills, and the eldership says, here, Mark, here's a bunch of money. Don't buy that TV with it, okay? But if a beggar comes, you just give him a few hundreds. What's going to happen within a week or two? That money's going to be gone. Why? So one guy's going to say, you won't believe this. And word's going to get around, and folks are just going to start coming here for the money. Wait a minute, we're here to teach you the gospel. We want to help you become a Christian and be a servant of the Lord. Yeah, I want the loaves and the fishes. Maybe God knew what he was doing when he was instructing us to use our money for the work of the church, to preach the gospel, support preachers, as we saw, support efforts, and to edify the saints. I mean, the Bible class materials. We don't pay for those typically as individuals. The church does. You order a lot of class material. The church pays for that. Office supplies, things like that. And I'm not going to get to this today. We will continue next week, and we're going to look at this a little bit. What we're going to look at is an individual who did help and gave some financial need to others. And we're going to kind of wrap things up. We've got one class left, so we're done for this morning. And we're going to wrap things up. We're reaching the end of a quarter. The new quarter starts in September, and we're excited about that. And we are going to, in our study next week, talk about some unscriptural arrangements in the work of the church. Thank you for your time considering what is really an important topic, Bible authority. All of this goes back to, what does the Bible say? How does it read to you? What are we to do in our service to God? Thank you.